everyone. Welcome to our International Women's Day panel, Challenging Bias to Rise Together. We're excited to bring together female professionals across a variety of industries to discuss how we can challenge bias and inequity in the workplace, how to build supportive networks, and to discuss the importance of allies to drive positive change. Let's start with some introductions. I am Victoria Phillips. I am the COO at Avionos. I have a 25-year career in marketing and technology. I've always had to balance, being a female leader, being a mom, juggling, all that comes with that. And so this conversation is, really important to me, not just to share the things that, I've learned over the years, but also to learn from everyone else. We're just really glad to have you guys here. International Women's Day is so much more than just a day. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, like all year long, that we continue to press for positive change. So discussions like this help enable that. So we'll go around and do some introductions with the rest of our panel. Why don't we start with Angie Stratman?
Hi, I'm Angie. I work for the Mom Project. I've been with them for about 2 years. I'm an account executive. So I help small and medium-sized businesses get connected with some amazing female talent in our community. This is super important to me. I'm, a minority woman, 100% Mexican, raised by immigrant parents. So my mom was a business owner herself. So this is super near and dear to my heart. And as a new mother to a daughter, I think it's important for us to continue the conversation and really empower each other as women. So I'm excited to be here and happy to have this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Angie. Lori.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Lori de Avila. I work as HR director for a marketing execution company called HH Global. I'm based in Bogota, Colombia, in Latin America, and feeling very honored, very happy to be here to share thoughts, opinions into this important subject for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you for being here. Grace.
Hi, my name is Grace DeRocha. I am coming to you from Michigan. I work for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. Through education and experience, I am actually a registered dietitian, and I have the privilege of working on our care management team as a digital strategist. Very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Similar to Angie, a child of immigrants, I'm Filipino American, and super passionate about doing what we can to make sure that women's voices are heard. And I want to show you, I don't know if you guys can see my shirt, but it says, strong women, know them, be them, raise them. So I also have a daughter. And so Angie, I hear you. Yay, go ladies.
That's awesome. Welcome, Grace. And last but not least, Amy.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me on this. I'm very excited. I'm here in Chicago, and I'm currently the Vice President of API Experience at JP Morgan Chase. Previously, I was a software engineer. A couple people might know the company Uptake. So I've transitioned into tech product, and all of those combinations. I'm really excited about Women's Day. It's something that is near and dear to my heart as a technologist. I think it's a great opportunity for us as women to just form bonds and really be appreciative of what we provide each other, not only what we provide to the world. So thank you.
That's awesome. Women in technology, fantastic. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. One big topic is, of course, on everyone's mind, the last year, this last crazy year that we've all had. And I think this year hit particularly hard for women. The pandemic, COVID-19, there are stats that show 275,000 women left the workforce in January this year. And with that, a disproportionate number of those women were Black and Latina. That's a huge impact, and that is unfortunate, right? And so, I'd love to hear more, Angie, with your work and research on the Mom Project. I know you have some thoughts on why that is and, what we can do about it.
Yeah, definitely. And, I don't think we can talk about the negative effects of the pandemic without first mentioning that something actually pretty extraordinary happened last year. For 3 months, women actually held more jobs than men in the US economy. And this has only happened a very small handful of times under rare circumstances. And I truly think it's important for us to acknowledge that, because the work we're doing, within our own companies and with diversity and equity, it's truly making a difference. But then obviously, the pandemic wreaked havoc on all aspects of life. And, women and moms were some of the hardest hit, and women are twice as likely to handle the majority of caregiving. And then obviously with all the e-learning, the education responsibilities, and women of color have been hardest hit because not only the industries, but their job types. So education, childcare, hospitality, retail, the increased responsibility for them to handle the childcare at home. Black women specifically with children, they're twice as likely to leave the workforce than their white counterparts. And Latinas currently have the highest unemployment rate. I know you mentioned that. So at 9.1%, and followed very closely by Black women at 8.4%. So it's clear, moms specifically, women are taking a big hit, and we're in the fight of our lives as we risk the unraveling of the decades of progress with DE&I initiatives coming apart. So, it brings us to the question that you kind of asked, as far as what can we do to maybe get in on the action, take care of some of the moms that we have, the women that we have that are trying to get back into the workforce. And I know, with the Mom Project, the answer is something we've been trying to uncover through our resident social scientist, Dr. Pam Cohen. She leads our research arm with Work Labs, and she spent a lot of this COVID time particularly gathering insights around, why inclusion is so important and why having women on staff improves employee experience. And, it comes down to women being truly the stakeholders with a lot of these companies' diversity and inclusion initiatives. And hopefully, we can get a lot more women back into the paid workforce now that hopefully the worst of COVID is behind us. So, I think it's important to have conversations like this and see where we can, kind of plug in and solutions we can create to get women back in.
Yeah, no, totally agreed. Grace, what do you think? I mean, what can employers do to try to, support and enable women to come back into the workforce so we get back to those, record highs that Angie was mentioning, not that long ago?
Yeah, I think that employers need to listen. I love the Mom Project, by the way, Angie. If there's something out there that says, if you want to get something done, ask a mom, she'll have it done before lunch. I always see that little meme, and it's true, right? Moms and women have organizational skills. They communicate, they feel, which I think sometimes gets a bad rap, but I think it's a beautiful thing. Being able to be empathetic and sympathetic and understand in a workforce too, what someone might lead as their leader, as, if you have customers that you can really focus on listening and actively listening. I also think that, here we go. Are you guys ready? I think that it has to be fair. I think that we need to make sure that not everything is put on us. I think that men need to step up. No offense, honey, you're great. But really, and have, again, those communicative conversations with them so that they're helping at home. They're a part of the solution, not saying that they're a problem, but still to be a part of the solution is a whole different thing. They have to be planning and organizing and helping on the behind the scenes so that women can take their leadership roles at the workplace.
That is such a good point, Grace, because the answer can't be, well, women just need to take on more, right? To get back and make that happen, and to get back at running on all cylinders is just okay. Just add to your plate, right? No, something has to give. Someone else has to step in and support and enable in order, to help us rise, right?
And it's funny because with the Choose to Challenge theme, I could never come up with one thing I wanted to focus on, but one of the things that I always think about, especially for women, is there's a glamorization of being busy. And rest can also be productive. And that means there's partnership, there is collaboration, there is, women supporting women, men supporting women, family supporting you, whatever it is that your village is, can come into play with all of that.
Yeah, there's, still, I think, a feeling of guilt,
Oof.
among women, right? To that rest, that rest time. There's almost like a badge of honor of being like, super busy and flat out, and it shouldn't be. There shouldn't be a guilt there, because you will not be as productive if you do not, or if you're not balanced, right? And
Right.
so, yeah.
Yeah, fill your cup too. I mean, like as a dietitian, I always think that's important too. Like you have to nourish your body and nourish your mind, because then what takes a hit? Women's mental health, I could go on a variety of topics, but just thinking of all, as we're talking about not thinking of all the things, but also thinking of all the things and the spectrum of things that you have to take care of and own, but also what can you delegate? I mean, I think a true leader has that ability. And women are definitely natural leaders.
Right on. So that's great. The delegation is a perfect segue to another related topic, just around in the workforce. What kind of barriers are there that make it difficult for women? If we want women to come back in and, re-enter employment, what do we need to set up structurally for them in our work? Whether it's having a team to delegate to, or having more support structures inside the company in order to enable women to re-enter and feel good and supported about that. Lori, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yes, and actually, before saying what we can do, I would like to point out two important structural barriers that I consider are very important, and especially here in LATAM. And the first one has to do with gender stereotype. So culturally, it has been accepted and defined that women leave the workforce in order for them to take care of family, children. And even if you think about it, in most countries in LATAM, even maternity and paternity leaves are different. You get maternity leave for 4 or 5 months, whereas paternity leaves in some countries, they don't even exist. So in parallel, as society, we do not assign the same importance to the maternity role as we would do with a woman that is actually taking over an organizational role. So I think, to your point of what we can do, I think the first thing is to actually create awareness, and to, especially in organizations, and to remove this idea that actually when women leave the workforce, they lose somehow their importance or the profile and the seniority that they have already achieved. So in the first place, I think that organizations need to set up different strategies so that bias gets eliminated. For example, in talent acquisition processes, that would be one of the first one and most direct ones. And the second one that I think as a structural barrier that we see a lot is that women do not get enough support from corporate groups, from public institutions. And it is hard nowadays to balance the different roles that we have as mothers, as executives, if you don't get that support, those tools. So you see yourself immersed in all of these stress, anxiety, because we have this necessity to actually fulfill all of our family's expectation, organization expectations. So I do believe that as a second action point, and to Angie's point as well, we need to create flexibility. That, for me, that's like critical. Flexibility in expectations, flexibility in time, provide tools for women to actually start transitioning to the workforce, not like immediately, but with the tools that they need.
Excellent. Yeah. Amy, what about you from, as we mentioned before, you're a woman in technology who is still, unfortunately, sometimes a unicorn these days. And, so are there uniquenesses there, coming from a more technical role for how we need to structure things so that women are, enabled in the workforce?
Definitely. I would say learning and training, those are the key things for succeeding in technology. It's a little bit of a different path to navigate because there are still very few women there's a lot of initiatives, especially in lower grade levels, middle school, elementary school. However, there is a drop off within high school and college that really needs to be addressed. Somehow women do not matriculate all the way up through the pipeline as their male counterparts. And studies have shown it's not because of intelligence, it's because of the way that men and women learn and are conditioned to learn. So I think that if we take training and skill sets very seriously versus what Lori and Angie were saying about what is the role of women in society versus what we can actually accomplish. So just kind of combining those two things in tech, I feel like there's many, many opportunities for women. We're creative, we're born leaders. We like to solve problems. We're always solving our friends' problems, our parents' problems. So technology offers a lot of problem solving. So I think there's some skill sets there we can lean on that we have naturally.
Yeah, that's great. Grace, I know you also had some thoughts about learning and training, and how we can enable that there as well, and then not necessarily in a technical role, just in general.
Yeah, God, I agree with everything that everyone has said thus far. I do think it's interesting to note that in kind of our patriarchal society, the way that things are structured and the way that things are done usually with a focus on white men. So taking a look at that and like the way that women learn, the way that different cultures learn to figure out the best way to actually teach some of those things in further grades and in college. I think of like my daughter now does a lot of STEM type of things, but I don't want that to ever go away. So thinking about, having something be a little bit more holistic in that learning process to encompass everyone, all genders, all races, all cultures.
Yeah, there's got to be a way to, bring that about earlier. Because I was just thinking about a friend of mine has a daughter in high school, and they have some kind of an engineering class as an elective, and they're in a hybrid model, so they're able to go into school for this class. And she showed up in the first day, and it was like her and 12 boys, and she just she actually felt a little uncomfortable with it, just because it was like, oh wow, why am I the only girl in here? So what you were saying earlier about that drop off, just like, why does that happen? And even though there are STEM classes early, and there are encouragement in science and engineering and technology, but yet there's a disconnect somewhere where that drops off. I don't know.
Definitely. I think a lot of it is what we've been hearing about, the imposter syndrome. Like as women, we walk into a room, it's full of men, and then we kind of question ourselves, should we actually be here? There's not another woman here. So what is the comparison factor? Just how did you get into this space, instead of focusing on, well, I've arrived in the space. Obviously, I have the skill set and the acumen to be in the space, and really just owning that and not feeling so alienated, just feeling the commonality of, well, these guys are interested in math and science, so am I. Let's build a project together.
Yeah, nice.
I love that.
Yeah, totally. Angie, what do you think? What about the Mom Project? I know a lot is being done to try to, make strides in this area. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of what Lori was saying resonates with some of the work that we're doing, with our clients. I think that it's all about how to put policies in place that support parents, mothers, women. Something that, we've implemented ourselves is employee resource groups. I think it's just so incredible to have a group of people that are like-minded, that experience, the same things as you. I'm actually a co-chair for our Latinx Hispanic ERG, Viva, and I'm meeting with them later today. Super excited to do that. But it's always just such a great place to have a sounding board to, talk to people that have similar experiences as you. And I don't think, we realize this is such an easy thing to put into place, especially with, us having the capabilities to do Zoom videos like this. It's so much easier than, it was in the past. And going into that with putting remote first, I think that in the past, a lot of companies were like, oh no, we can't function remote. And one of the good things to come out of this whole COVID thing was, hey, we've seen so many companies successfully, navigate this remote workforce. And they're striving, they didn't miss a beat. I know we were talking about, we were muting our Slacks, our Microsoft Teams, but you're almost in more communication with your colleagues, with your team, and you're able to get things done, I think, a little bit easier. Lori was talking about flexibility. And that means, so many different things. It doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, I'm looking for part-time or, I want to be 100% remote, but it's a lot of people, women specifically, want the understanding from their managers. They want to know that they're going into a team that they're not going to feel chastised for having to take their child to a doctor's appointment or, God forbid, have to take a mental health day. We're seeing that more and more too, where we do take on a lot. We put a lot on our plates. And I think sometimes, myself included, I just have to take a step back and say, I need today off just, to recharge my batteries. And having a company that will offer that to you is incredible. And I think something else, a huge missed opportunity that I think people can do this as today is have your employees write a review about you. Let these companies that are having a really great culture experience, that are really great for minorities, that are doing wonderful things for women, tell the world. I think it's so important that there's so many companies out there that I talk to that I had no idea that they're offering these really incredible benefits that make families' lives a little bit easier. And it's like, if, there's Glassdoor, there's so many places you can review your company these days, put those things out there, let the world know that, this company's doing great things. Your female employees will love to write you a review if they're having a positive experience. And that's how you're going to retain and attract more diverse talent at the end of the day.
That's great. I love actual practical, real tips there and advice on what to do. Yeah, that's fantastic. Going back, Amy, to what you were talking about before with imposter syndrome, I want to dive in a little bit more on that. What advice do you have for women that may be struggling with, feelings like that, or may have fear or anxiety being in a workplace that maybe is male dominated, or, maybe they don't feel like they have earned that seat at the table. What strategies do you have that you've either used or you can advise others on to confront those feelings and confront bias and, put yourself where you belong, where you deserve?
Yeah, definitely. So I initially had those feelings as well. So I'm very empathetic to people who are maybe switching careers, moving up in their career, any type of acceleration. It's just really understand what you're feeling and acknowledge it. So if you feel imposter syndrome, address it immediately. Why am I feeling this way? And then once again, just go back to your skill set. What do you know? How can you leverage what you know? How can you prove that you know this to your counterparts? And how can you be confident in presenting any type of data or any type of opinions that you may have, even if they're differing opinions? Like I was on a call the other day with someone who's pretty high up in the organization, and I didn't agree with a specific architecture point for one of the technologies they're introducing. And the most important fact is not that you disagree, but how you disagree and the data that you have to back up. So if there's something you have to say in a meeting, just make sure that you're educated on your stance. Either party may be right or wrong, but just bring that type of data to the meeting and you'll feel prepared to really go forward.
Yeah, that's good. Also good practical advice. I think too, if you have supportive bosses in your organization or, or leaders or mentors, they can really help give you perspective. I think back on, some of the best leaders that I had in my career that, they didn't open doors for me and say, take this job. Instead, what they did that was so great is help me gain my confidence and help me see what I did that was an accomplishment that earned me that spot, right? You know, and they sort of like encouraged me by pointing out, like, well, listen, you did this, this, and this. That's the same as this other guy. Why don't you think you deserve that promotion? You know,
Exactly.
you know, so, yeah, that having like seeking out people like that, or if you're fortunate enough to just, you know, get aligned to someone like that, I think it makes all the difference in just helping you realize, like, no, yeah, the imposter syndrome feelings are real and normal, right, and very typical. But to help you, you know, remember all of the things that you have done that you know, have earned you that seat at the table. So
yes, I 100% agree, Victoria. And just to quickly note on that, mentors and allies do not have to look like you. I do not know how many times I have to stress that to people. You don't have to seek out a woman, or you don't have to seek out a minority. Seek out someone who has your best interests aligned. And that's the most critical person that's going to introduce you to other people who will align your path as well.
Fantastic.
Okay. I totally agree with all of that, Victoria and Amy. I was just going to say, to piggyback off of that, I agree. I've had different mentors and leaders that didn't look like me, were someone that I never thought I would actually connect with. And as like keeping an open mind to that, I think was half the battle. And also, I feel like I've had imposter syndrome in a variety of different points in my life, but I've had different leaders or different mentors in my life in general that reminded me that being you, or Grace or Angie or Victoria or Lori or Amy, like, is your superpower. Like, no one else is you. Do you know what I mean? And just from that lens alone, you have something to offer. And I think that's important to remember.
Excellent. Yes, agreed. Wholeheartedly. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the networks that we have and the people we surround ourselves with, and how we put in place, you know, a supportive network so that we do feel like we can make progress, especially in this last year of, you know, people feeling isolated and, you know, working remotely. And, you know, although the technology has enabled us to work remotely so easily, at the same time, you do have to work harder to make those connections and, you know, reach out to people. So would love to hear your thoughts, Grace, on, you know, your personal experiences about creating a supportive network and, you know, how you've done that over the last year.
Yeah, I think there's different support systems. There's you have your work ones, you have your friends, you have your dance mom friends. I have that group too. But figuring out, I think one of the most important things, especially over this past year, is like, how do you all like collectively like to communicate? Do you know what I mean? I have some dietitian friends that hate texting and like only want to talk on the phone. So like figuring out the way that you're going to actually connect with one another to like have those moments of discussion like we are today, and allyship and venting or inspiring one another. So I think that comes into play and is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have at Blue Cross Blue Shield, do you have programs or things that are set up that enable, you know, those connection points with people?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like we're very lucky. We actually have, and it's just changed. We have a whole entire diversity and inclusion division, actually. And I know not a lot of companies have that. I think it's amazing, and just things to think about to inspire towards. One thing that we did actually make the change in the name, it was always diversity and inclusion. And this year we changed it, and it's now inclusion and diversity, just to put that in the forefront of what we focus on. And we have tons of different groups. We have everything from women groups to different cultural groups. We have a sign language group. I mean, there's literally so many different things. And the beauty of it too is not only like being a leader and being a voice in like the Asian American one, but also looking at learning from all the other groups as you kind of go along. And we offer a lot of different learning sessions too.
Yeah. How about anyone else have any exceptional programs in their workplace that, you know, enable progress here?
The Mom Project, we do. Obviously, our entire premise is being built upon this community of women, parents, allies that are looking for great opportunities. And something that we really pride ourselves in is building a community of people that can speak to each other. So our technology, we've built these lounges, which are these like chat rooms people can go into. And, it could be, like you mentioned, Grace Dance Moms. It could be, anything that you want to talk about that you have, on your mind and talk to other women. We especially encourage people that are returning back into the workforce to communicate with each other, because chances are they're going through the same kind of challenges of, hey, I've been out of the workforce for 5 years and now I'm back at this job and things are different. The work landscape has changed. So we've built a community, not only internally, for our Mom Project employees through our employee resource groups and things of that nature, but really thinking about the over 350,000 people that are registered with our community. We want to give them an opportunity to meet and talk to other people. Something else we do is a mentorship program where we partner. I know, Amy, you mentioned your mentor does not have to look like you. I'm actually in a mentorship program with a woman right now that is much older than me, and we don't have a ton in common, and but professionally, we're there, and it's incredible to have those opportunities to meet people I would have never normally met with. And our rally program, it's a 3-month program. I talk to this woman once a week and we just get on a Zoom and just chat, because at this point, we've built this really great relationship. And I jokingly say I talk to her more than some of my friends. And, her and I have been communicating about things that I wouldn't even talk to my friends about. So it's incredible, the things that we can do in this kind of remote environment to help each other that we wouldn't normally be doing, because life is just moving so fast. I would never take the 30 minutes to get on a video call normally, so it does kind of shine a light on how things have changed.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's great. That's so great that your workplaces have, structures put in place to, to help. I want to talk a little bit about the reverse side of things, where, there may be unsupportive environments. So I was recently featured in an article for International Women's Day, and it was titled, Women Need More Solidarity and Less Game of Thrones in the Workplace, right? And so, it kind of got at that perception that women sometimes, I'm fortunate not to have that experience, but that some women see each other as competition in the workplace, especially in industries where there are historically fewer women, like technology or, maybe finance, some of those traditional industries that have that situation. And so I want to know from you guys, do you think that's true? Is it cutthroat? Are women feeling, up against other women, and, that they need to edge each other out, edge out the competition to get those, coveted spots? Is it that vicious? And, is it Game of Thrones like? What's been your experiences?
I think that I don't believe that, I think that probably in few years back, we may have seen each other as competition, but one of the greatest platforms we have now is ERGs, and ERGs have had this impact where you're able to actually share stories where you think you're the only one, and you see that there are other women doing the same thing, experiencing the same thing, with the same doubts, with the same fears. And I think that has achieved for us to increase our partnership, increase our empathy. I also believe that there are right now a lot of companies that actually thrive for this partnership between women. So you have mentorship relationships where you not only work in self-confidence, because I don't know if you have noticed this, but when we are in a setting where we have women with us, our self-confidence tends to increase. We feel supported. We feel like the things that we're saying are important. So not only working in self-confidence, but we are developing mentoring relationships to increase our business acumen, our financial acumen, our networking, all of these skills that actually might take us to a leadership position. So definitely, I think that's an urban myth, if I may say so. I don't think we actually see ourselves as competition. And from my personal experience, I take pride into working in a company that has more than 50% of women working there and taking leadership positions, managerial positions. So from my personal experience, what I've seen is that when companies actually close the gender gap and you see that there is balance, the agenda and the attention comes to other things, not related necessarily with competition between each other, but more with teamwork and how we thrive to achieve what each one of us is eager to have in the organization.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm glad that you've had such a positive experience and that it is an urban myth for you. Yeah, that's wonderful. How about anybody else?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Lori. It's more so a positive experience, especially when I was working on a dev team. So it was all men mostly. And then you would see another woman would get hired as a software engineer and you're like, yay, this is awesome. And then you do lunch and you do coffee. So it's definitely quite the reverse in tech, that you want to pair up with that person as soon as possible. And the guys are then trying to wage some type of Game of Thrones against you. but normally for women, we stick together in tech.
Excellent. Anybody have more of that experience of it being a little more cutthroat? Actually a positive. We can all say no, we have not had that experience.
I feel like I've seen it, but I don't think I've personally experienced it, but like I've seen it around me, like it in different workplaces and like in different departments. Mm-hmm. It's icky. Is that it's an icky feeling to see or like to start to witness, and like a reminder like that I don't want to be like that. I feel really fortunate that I've had really nice leaders and really great teammates, and I've had the opportunity to mentor people where we lift each other up and are very supportive and remind each other of our superpowers, and knowing that we're a masterpiece and a work in progress throughout the entire process, I think is really important. So lots of high fives, lots of go teams, but I feel like I've seen it, and I feel icky is the only word I can think of right now that can describe. It's a very, and I've seen friends go through it, and it's a very negative, terrible experience for them. You know what I mean? It's something that would drive someone to leave a position. When there's that competitiveness, and sometimes you see that from leadership to employees. I had that once. I did have that once. That was where a manager felt like she was in competition with me. And I was like, you are my boss. I am just trying to make all of us look good and get the work done. And it was very, that was hard. I was a lot younger then too. So I don't think I use my voice the way that I would now. Yeah. That's something I always try to remind myself, use your voice, even if it shakes. So like to be able to speak my mind and be like really clear and simple and direct, and professional. But I learned that early on in my career. You guys just brought me, I forgot about that. I think I tucked that away in like the recesses of my mind, because it was not like I would cry at home when I would get home just because of the things that were said from that, but not with my peers. The peers were very supportive. So stay away from that and be a leader that's not like that.
I've been in sales roles a lot, and to Lori and Amy's point now, absolutely not. And I wouldn't even put up with it at this juncture in my career. But, I've been in sales for a long time, and a lot of times that can be male dominated. I've had specific experiences where I was on a team with all men. I was the only woman, and the only other woman on, was a support position. So her and I didn't even work together directly. And it's hard because you feel like you're constantly, that you were mentioning the imposter syndrome, where you're constantly trying to prove why you have a seat at the table. And I think that's really hard. And, when there's your team's having closed door meetings without you, and you're like, wait a minute, did I miss something? And No, you just weren't invited. And I think that that's really tough to overcome, in general. And I think that when another woman comes into that position, you're almost pegged against each other, like Amy mentioned, where they're Game of Throning you, against each other, when that didn't even necessarily have to happen. Another woman joining the team should have been an exciting experience, a let's go to get coffee, let's become BFFs. But instead, and specifically with sales, which can, be pretty high pressure, and, you're constantly competing with everybody because you want to be the top salesperson, adding the gender part of that, I think, it can cause such a horrible experience. And it does. Obviously, I'm not with that company anymore, but it does. It causes a toxic environment, and then that trickles down from your senior leaders to your, leads, to the team members, and all the way to the support positions, where, it becomes such a volatile place to work. And I think that's hard, and to overcome that, it's just being able to, rise above and help each other. Like you were saying, Grace, lots of high fives, lots of encouragement. And, the Mom Project is predominantly female. And we have a super diverse employee experience. And I think it's so great to get to, shout out to each other and say, oh my gosh, great job, and constantly recognizing people that are going above and beyond, and just being rock stars. So I think that can help a lot with culture.
Yeah. Awesome. Grace and Angie, you both have talked about, how you, maybe earlier in your career might have put up with some of that, but, no way now, you found your voice, even if it's shaky, and it's probably not shaky at all anymore. You guys are pros, but, have you seen evolution in the workplace, like compared to like your younger self earlier in your career, in terms of, how, whether there, were fewer DE&I programs back then, or were, there were less supportive networks or less supportive structures versus now? Like, how have you seen the workplace evolve throughout your career from your early days till now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely changed just with like the social economical way of the world. We have a female vice president. We have a minority female vice president, which is incredible to see. As a young girl, I never saw anything like that. In fact, I very rarely saw, minority women specifically in, leadership positions. So it's definitely changed the way, just socially, what's going on. I think that there's more awareness with some different movements that have been put into place to really empower women. And we see this really great, even International Women's Day. I would have never even celebrated that a few years ago within work. And now it's something that we recognize company-wide, and even having, a panel like this to discuss and have that, milk box to get on and say, hey, here's my voice. And something I would give an advice to myself, back in the day when I was starting a career, is just the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Like Grace says, you have to advocate for yourself. Be your biggest champion. No one is going to be advocating for you. No one's going to speak on your behalf. You can meet these really great mentors and really great people, but Victoria, like you said, no one's like, oh, take this job. You have to be your biggest champion. And I think we're in such a different place just with female empowerment that we're not turning back. We're breaking down the barriers. We're changing everybody's mind. We're showing that the gender bias is real. And I think it's just become a different landscape over the past, even, I would say, 2-3 years.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that you just said, Angie. I think earlier in my career, I didn't see, though, in leadership roles as many women as I do now. So mad props to all of us. But also, I think, see, guys, it's not all man bashing here. I think men are also seeing that there is a gender gap, that there is things that they weren't aware of. And like their ignorance might have been bliss, or just because they didn't know or they didn't realize because they weren't living that experience, where they use their voice to help advocate for women. I've seen that like later in my career, which is like a really beautiful thing. And So yeah, I think it's going to keep getting better. I think it continues to have a spotlight on it, and we're having conversations and we're doing things. Before, I think also earlier in my career, there were like little talks about it, but no one was really doing anything and no one was highlighting it. And there was no social media, to really expand that voice of things that are happening. Blessing and curse, good old social media. But yeah, I'm really hopeful for what the future holds for men and women as we kind of work through this together.
Yeah, I love that you brought up men, because I think, we cannot do this in a bubble, right? The importance of allies and the emergence of allies over the last few years, I think is, just an important thing to acknowledge. Lori, do you want to talk about your thoughts on allies? What makes a good ally? What role do allies play in helping us challenge inequality and challenge bias?
Yes, sure. I think there's two things about allies that I consider. And the first one is that a good ally speaks up, speaks out loud. And that means for me that we see inequities in the workplace. Sometimes we see it, sometimes we perceive them, but for me, it takes a lot of bravery and courage to actually point them out and speak about them. So for me, it's critical for a good ally to actually, if you see them, even if you perceive them, to speak about them and confront these inequities in the workplace, in family, in almost every space that we can get within society. And the second one I would think about is a good ally is an advocate. And I love that word because it means that an advocate is someone that is truly passionate and proactively supporting women and listening to their concerns and respecting what they have to say and actually using our circle of influence to change the way we see these inequities. So for me, these two things are like, for sure, one of the most important things for an ally.
Yep, that's great. Anybody else? Any other thoughts on allies? Do you have any? Have you experienced having good allies? And well, especially Angie, I'm interested in the Mom Project, where there probably are a lot fewer men. Is the dynamic sort of reversed? I mean, are men actually feeling unsupported
we're their allies. we've banded together. No, it's crazy because when people register with us, a lot of companies are like, hey, there's actually men in your platform. I don't know if you knew that. And we're like, yes, we absolutely do that, because we do think Lori hit the nail on the head with advocates, these people that are banded together saying that they support the mission. They want to get women back into the paid workforce. They want to help with diversity and inclusion. They want to have these really great, experiences for women. So yeah, it's funny, when we have like a dad group and it's so small because there's not that many men, and it's crazy. But we have, I think allyship is just so important with showing your support, showing up for each other, and having a voice and speaking to people that might not normally have had that conversation. So I think it's really a great thing.
I would like to say too, like having managed people and then having leadership that saw me more than just the workhorse. I've had bosses say to me, she's great. It's around Halloween time, and I know your kids are young. Can you make sure you attend their Halloween party and just put it in your calendar? And I remember hearing that, and I was like, I was overwhelmed with like, I feel seen as more. We talk about work-life balance all the time, but like work-life balance it's just not 50-50, right? There's work, there's life, there's your own mental health, there's your own self-care, there's eating good, there's getting sleep, it's not just a 50-50 split. And so to be seen, like, that's like one of my favorite stories, because to be seen in that moment, and then to know that moving forward, that is something that I should focus on and should ask for in the workplace from my leader, or to let them know, like, this is, my kids are important, my family is important to me. I have things that I'm going to want to do with them, and kind of part of that flexibility with location and work times. And I want to go to my kid's Halloween party, and it was driven by my leadership to remind me of that. I was like, whoa, that's
pretty amazing.
I know, right? Yeah. So
great. Okay, great. So I think now we'll check the Q&A from the audience, and anybody out there, if you want to submit a Q&A, feel free. We'll answer a couple questions, and then we'll wrap up with a couple final questions. So let me check. Okay, first, a very simple question here in the Q&A is, will we share a link for the programs? Yeah, so yes, we will have some information coming out after after the recording. We're going to put stuff up on our YouTube channel and social medias, and so we'll get that out there, just for some housekeeping. Okay, so some questions that are popping up. Any advice for starting an ERG for a women's group in your company?
I can help with this one. I actually helped start the Latinx Hispanic ERG group. And at this time, simultaneously, all these different ERGs were popping up. And one thing that I did, I reached out to other leaders in the space on LinkedIn specifically, and was like, hey, I noticed that you're a leader in this ERG. I have no idea what I'm doing. I didn't even know what an ERG was. Can you help me? Can you, reach out to other people, feel empowered to have those conversations? Every person I reached out to about it was so happy to lend a hand, give me some advice. And, some people I'm even keeping in touch with still. And they were able to give me some best practices, some ways that they structure their ERG. That was one thing that I really found to be super helpful, is reaching out to others that have already done it.
Great advice. This one I think is a good one for Amy. How do you overcome imposter syndrome when you're the only female voice in the room, or you're the only woman in your role?
Yes, definitely relating back to your skill set. Like, if you know that you're in that room, there's a reason. Someone saw value for you to be there. And you just have to understand, like, I already put this work in. I think that's the biggest thing to remember, is that you did the work to get there. It's important to keep up the work, but at the same time, it's like, well, I'm here, I have the skills. So just be as vocal as you can. And like I said, there's going to be opposing viewpoints. You might oppose your manager or your boss's boss, but just be polite, respectful, and always have that data backing you up. Like, I know this, these are the skills I have, this is the experience I've had, this is what I can bring to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. This is an interesting one. Any advice on how to handle male coworkers who continue to provide advice when I'm doing really well on my own, but they want to say they've helped my success? Has anyone encountered things like that?
Oh, yes.
There's someone out there. Go ahead.
I definitely want to chime in with this, especially with code reviews. In tech, you do a lot of like peer programming and development together on an application. And a lot of times, if you're new to the team, new to the dev team, maybe older developers, male developers might say, okay, I do it this way. So that's a way of kind of coaching you to do it their way. Maybe your way is actually more correct and more efficient. So at first, you want to always be open to any type of criticism or anything you can do better for your code reviews. But ultimately, if you have a solution that's working, maybe you can introduce to them in the next peer programming session, like, hey, let's try it this way and see if this is actually more efficient. So just always making sure it's a conversation and not just a directive.
Excellent. Here's a great one. What can I teach my kids about passing over gender biases in the present and the future? So like, what can we be doing for the younger generations to set them up to be in an even better position than we are today, whether those are male or female kids, right? So any thoughts there from the moms or anyone really?
How much time do we have left? I'm just kidding.
Go for it, Grace.
No, I think that you should have those conversations today, as young or as little as they are, to remind them of those things, like today. There's so many great books out there. Now I feel like in TV shows and movies, there's so much more representation that way. I never saw an Asian character on TV when I was little, let alone an Asian female. So just exposing them to that and having those conversations with them, I think is like one of the best things. And then now there are so many different extracurricular activities that can lend them. So like my daughter does, like I said, like a lot of STEM and STEAM type of things, even online, and just exposing them to that. And my son does too, for that matter. But my son also takes dance class. So
yeah, that's great. So this is interesting. I have seen this myself. So it is a situation where I think men are more apt to, in a meeting or a room full of people, are more apt to talk over someone, whereas a woman is, again, this is a broad generalization, but is more likely to wait for a break in the conversation to get, make her point be known. So the question here is, how do you stop male coworkers who are interrupting you and not even excusing themselves, so that you can either continue your point or make your point heard?
I have some tactics. I'm not sure if they're like the best. So some of the things that this has happened to me a lot in my career at different points, but I would say, thank you, so-and-so man. And then like kind of not dismiss them, but like end them so that you could speak. That's like one of my nicer tactics. Some of the other ones I would just say, not to be foolish, but I would raise my hand or even say, like, thank you, so-and-so. I was actively listening to everyone during that conversation. I would also like to add my 2 cents in, because it's not a burn. It's just because in a meeting, you want to be actively listening. So you're consuming everything as well, instead of just being ready to say whatever you're going to say, because that's not actually conversational. That's just like a presentation.
Yeah, and I would add there to Grace's point that you need to evaluate the context, because sometimes you get the possibility to actually wait until the other person again starts talking and everything. But sometimes when this is repetitive, and if it's culturally within the organization accepted, sometimes I would say that you just need to make it conscious. And to make it conscious is to say, I'm talking. Let me finish for the next minute or so, and then we can go back to your point. And I think that there is even a cultural bias there, because we think that we're being rude by saying to the other person, I'm talking, and it's not necessarily. It's actually something that sometimes, depending on the context and how repetitive this is, we need to do, of course, with assertiveness, but it is possible to do so. So yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great point.
I'm speaking, and you should not feel guilty because you weren't speaking. You are not the rude one. The person interrupting you is the rude one, right? I'm speaking. Okay, so thank you all for the Q&A. We're just gonna wrap up. We just have a couple minutes, so we'll wrap up with like one maybe one more question. And maybe everybody can answer this one. What advice would you give yourself when you were first, knowing what you know now, when you were first starting out in your career, as a college grad or, whatever, in your younger days? What would you tell yourself? Who'd like to go first?
I'll start. I kind of touched on this earlier, but I would say speak up and get out of your own way, step aside and let yourself shine, because I think that a lot of times we get in our own heads about taking an opportunity or speaking up for ourselves. And if you want it, grab it. I mean, the worst thing that somebody can say to you is no. And you will be surprised that a lot of times the answer is not no. It's let's move the needle this way. Let's try to get you to that point. And you might have not, you'll pass out on a lot of opportunities if you don't just advocate for yourself and speak up.
Absolutely. How about you, Grace?
I literally just gave a very similar speech to my daughter about that. And I think I give myself this speech all the time. Don't dim your light. don't allow yourself to shine and like be who you are. I think, and this might be a gender thing. I'm not sure, or it's just different people do this, but I think often we have moments where we're like, ooh, I have a good idea, but I don't know if they're going to think it's a good idea, or I have a thought here, but they're going to think it's stupid. And again, I always use your voice, even if it shakes, and reaffirm yourself and have moments of gratitude in that too. I love affirmations. I'm a big fan of reminding myself, like, don't dim your light, use your voice, even if it shakes, have courage, but be kind, whatever it is that I'm feeling at the moment. But I think it's important to remind yourself of who you are, or as you're growing, remind yourself of who you want to be, like your best, most amazing self, and you can do it. You can do it.
That's awesome. Lori.
I would say you don't have to be 100% prepared to take onto that role, to ask for that raise, to have this big team reporting to you. So just have to trust your potential, your voice, and what you can bring to the table. You don't have to be 100% prepared, for sure. So you just have to fake it till you make it. I would say that.
That's wonderful. I totally think that's true. We, feel like we need to, have everything perfect, and then we're ready, go for it. Just go for it. Okay, Amy, how about you?
Yeah, I definitely want to agree with what Lori said as far as having everything 100%. You can be ready before you think you're ready. And I think in college, we kind of focus on this path and this set skill set, and you have this degree. I don't even use my degree. It's in political science and international relations. So it has nothing to do with technology. But I think when you are passionate about something and you want to learn about it, that's going to be your career path. Like there was weekends where I was coding, where I could have been going out with friends. It's just deciding what you want to do in life and sticking to it. And it might not be the same thing as what your college degree actually says.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, I think that wraps up our hour. Thank you, ladies, so much for your participation and your wisdom and insights and your candor. I hope that our audience out there got something from this. I think there was a lot of practical advice, which is terrific. And I think if nothing else, you also will feel you are not alone. These are all experiences. Everyone's nodding their heads when somebody talks about their experience. Other people have felt that too, right? So feel validated that you are not alone. And hopefully you've gotten, some ideas for how to manage those situations and break through. So anyway, thank you all for joining us and spending the hour with us. Really appreciate it, and go out there and let's keep making change, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.